Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Happier Active. I'm Ellie, the host. And this week I was super excited to have Milena Batanova, who's the Director of Research and Evaluation at Making Caring Common, which is the Harvard research project that I've mentioned quite a few times in other episodes. The tagline is raising kids who care about others and the common good, which I absolutely love. So this was amazing that they agreed to come on and talk to me because I'm so interested in this in terms of how we raise our children and how we're thoughtful about how when we're doing this stuff it actually affects our mental health and how our whole household runs, which helps us be happier and healthier and live better, more thoughtful lives. So it all kind of ties into health in ways that we don't necessarily think of as health, but it's all interconnected and related. This was an amazing conversation mostly about empathy and how we can help our children develop empathy and techniques we can use and why that's important. So I can't wait for you to hear it. And as ever, if you have any thoughts, feelings, feedback, topics you want covered, you can email me or DM me on Instagram. They're the best two. And other than that, I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. So enjoy. There are many ways to find your path to better health and happiness, and what works is highly individualized. My philosophy is that most people are more likely to find that if they're active participants in their own journey. So this is a space to start exploring some of the rich and varied areas in which people practice, so you can start thinking about what resonates with you and discover new or different practices to either start or deepen your own health journey. And today I have Milena Batanova who is the Director of Research and Evaluation at Making Caring Common. So I'm very excited to have you on. And why don't you tell us a bit about what you do?
Hi, Ellie. Thanks so much for having me on. This is so great. So, Making Caring Common is a project of the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. The project was founded over 10 years ago, I believe. So, before I joined, about 8 years ago. And it was formed out of this. Sentiment that there were rising concerns that we were demoting moral and collective responsibility and kind of over glamorizing personal success and achievement. So, our mission at Making Caring Common is to equip educators, families, and colleges with the tools that they need to raise young people who value empathy and caring across differences, fairness, and the common good. So, my job as a director of research and evaluation is to ensure that our tools are research backed, and that they show evidence of impact, but also to conduct our own research on topics related to caring and the common good. So, as of lately, we've actually been doing a lot of work on loneliness and mental health in young people and parents. And as a result of that, we created a mental health toolkit for middle and high schools.
So when I talk about health, I think people often think of it as just being physical health, but I kind of mean, whole health. And that's why what you guys do, I really like, because it kind of addresses that often the areas where people have trouble keeping up with other stuff is because they have low self-esteem or they're lonely or their mental health isn't great. And that makes it harder to do all the other stuff, right? That makes you feel kind of healthier and happier, because those things make it hard to get out of bed and to eat well and to do all your things and make informed choices about how you're raising your children, how you're trying to help your family be part of productive society.
Yeah.
And so that's what really appeals to me. And actually how I found you guys was when I was pregnant. We've got dogs, and I was a bit worried that they were going to be struggle with the adjustment. So I was looking on these, various Instagram things for people to help get the dogs ready for the baby coming. And there was this lady who'd made a reel about your research around chores for children being a good way to make them have self-esteem in the long run. And so she'd made a reel about, age appropriate chores that you can start giving around with pet care from like 18 months with
Oh.
toddlers. And it was so cool. And then I kind of clicked through and was like, oh my gosh, there's all this other stuff in there as well, not just that. So that was kind of how I found you guys. And I really like
Oh, okay.
how
So
well
you
it's all
found
like
our
set
blog.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you found our blog on, I think it was a blog on chores by our then director of
Hmm.
communications.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and a lot of what we talk about, we center on empathy, right? And caring.
Hmm.
Like chores, for example, like, of course, we want our kids to just help out and, make things easier for us. Absolutely, that's a given. But I think underneath that, chores are really there to also help our kids be responsible and think about empathy, right? Like
Hmm.
when I don't I don't just tell my kid, and sometimes I do, right? I'm like, Luke, please put away your plate. Luke, please clean up your toys. Of course, I
Hmm.
do that some of the time. But a lot of the time, like, I also want him to recognize that, like, mommy really needs help. Like, mommy is so
Hmm.
tired. Can you please help me with this? So it's just like that little add on, like that little framing that
Hmm.
might remind him that in doing a chore or helping out, he's actually helping me out and he's helping this like bigger system, right? He's helping the family unit.
Hmm.
So it goes back to what empathy really is about, which is wanting to like really care to understand or help someone else because you get their experience or because you get their feelings. And that can start early on, right? Like I think even Allie said that in that blog. It can start as early as with toddlers, and it obviously moves up with age, right? And I think the hardest but most important thing is to motivate chores in such a way that kids really start to want to do them, not because they have to
Hmm.
or because they get paid, but because it's the right thing to do. It's because they're helping out. The family functions better, it builds better bonds, and they feel like good contributing members.
Yeah. And what I found interesting about that research is that it then said that the kids where that's happening from young all the way through go on to be adults with better self-esteem. So there is a link between helping children develop these skills, that's not just about your house being an easier place to live in because you're not constantly arguing with them about helping whatever load the dishwasher, but also it has like a benefit for them in the long run as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a benefit to them and to others, right? Like maybe they start to see themselves
Yeah.
as good moral people, right? People who
Hmm.
contribute to others and who care for others. So by caring for
Yeah.
their surroundings, they're also caring for others who have to live in those surroundings.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I some of my college roommates, had had some of that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, this applies to all, right? Not just kids. Yeah, totally. Like, oh, wow, you look so tired just coming back from work. I'll do the dishes, even though it's
Mhm.
your turn to do the dishes, right?
Yeah, and it's so. What I think is interesting about all of this stuff is that, like, on the face of it, it can seem about one thing, but it just knocks on into every area of life. Like you said, it's about those, then it changes how they start interacting with other people and with the world, and probably once they go into jobs and at school, and having those skills to kind of understand other people's feelings makes you, or should
Yep.
make you, a better employee, a better partner when you're, all those things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like early on, we can start instilling in our kids what it means to think about others just as they think about
Hmm.
themselves. Right. So I like to define empathy as um, the willingness to really care to understand
Hmm.
the particularities of someone's experience or feelings. And while younger kids might find that difficult, right, to really like dig in and understand why someone is
Hmm.
feeling the way they are, they're capable, right? Kids as young as 4 can be prompted or nudged to at least like think about why someone might be thinking a certain way or feeling a certain way. And then
Hmm.
as they grow older, right, it's our job to nudge them a little more, right, and have more conversations and experiences that really make them think about other people in different ways.
Yeah, that reel I was talking about with the dog thing, it was really interesting because she had things that you could do from like 18 months, and some of that was just like get a cup of dog food and they can just pour it out. But I think we often are limited by thinking kids can't do things, but actually from very young you can start putting some of these things in if you use your imagination quite well. So even when my daughter was 18 months, I would have her like hold her own laundry and then carry her to the laundry basket and she would drop it in, and it was like a fun game, but it's still
Yeah.
part of that, like, they're your clothes, so you have to put them in the laundry basket.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, that's cool. I love that. Yeah, gamifying definitely work. Gamifying
Hmm.
is definitely like that's totally recommended with younger kids, especially like making things fun and exciting gets them more motivated.
Yeah, I try and sort of not use the word chores because I think it immediately has this like negative association.
Yeah.
Because things like the laundry, folding the laundry when they're like my daughter's too, it's really fun at the moment because she can just choose the colors. She just stands by the tumble dryer and she passes me things and tells me what they are or what color they are, and that's at the moment that's like a really fun game for her. So she
Yeah,
doesn't
I
need to
love
know
that.
it's a household chore yet.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good point. I don't know if I've ever really used that word either.
No.
Like with my 5-year-old, he's really into making his bed right now, which is great.
Hmm.
And the way I've been, and I don't even think I came up with this. I just said something like, "Hey, since I make our bed, can you make your bed?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I need to cover my stuffies." So he makes it in such a way that he's also tucking in his like favorite stuffies,
So
um,
cute.
which I also think is so adorable. And this shows that that's also like empathy in a way, right? He's
Hmm.
making his bed because he cares about his stuffed animals, and he wants them to be like nice and cozy. Um, yeah, it's so sweet. I think like reducing the pressure, like
Hmm.
reducing the pressure and the obligation of it, and either making it fun or just like something that's good to do, either because you do it or because it's good to do in general. Um,
Yeah.
it's light.
Yeah. Because it can easily, it's something I see when parents are super stressed, it can easily have become like an area of conflict,
Oh
like
yeah.
chores if they're like framed negatively. And so then trying to turn them into, like you say, like gamifying them or making them having that different understanding of why we're doing them is not just because like mum's mad and you've got to do it, but because it's part of the house and like you live here too and you've eaten the meal, so you've got to help clean it up or prepare it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also realize, I mean, we're talking younger kids, right? I
Yeah.
feel like I don't have a teenager yet. So I fully
Yeah, that's a whole
empathize
different
with the
thing.
parent. I empathize with the parents of teenagers,
Hmm.
right? Who might be thinking, this doesn't fly in my household. This can't possibly work with my 14-year-old who just refuses to put away clothes or make his bed,
Hmm.
right? Like they're not covering their stuffies. Like they're past that
No.
stage. So I get that. I totally get that. And like one thing, for example, we know that motivates empathy, right? And I see doing chores, whether we call it that or not, as motivating empathy underneath it all,
Hmm.
um, is to make it like valuable or socially rewarding in some way, and
Hmm.
not I didn't and I don't mean materially, right? Like in a monetary way.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that, you do that. Like that's cool. Teenagers need money too. And they need to earn it some way. But I think also to make it like socially like rewarding, right? Like
Hmm.
whether that be like I don't know, praising them, right? And telling them like, wow, that's such a cool thing you did. Like that really helped me out.
Hmm.
You know, that might do something for some kids. or pointing out maybe that some of their friends do it, like, through their moms or dads, right,
Mhm.
or caregivers that, hey, I know that, friend X, Y, or Z, like, does this and that. Why
Mhm.
don't, that could work, right? Because that's also the piece about like norms, like social norms really help, like knowing that other people are doing it or expecting it.
Mhm.
Um, and that it's not just you, but it's part of a bigger whole. Like, I think that helps.
Yeah, and teens are difficult because they're like there's all the hormones and they're kind of in a point where they're almost like biologically supposed to argue with you. So
Yeah.
it's quite tricky. But I think if you've done some of that empathy work earlier, even if they're not doing it in your household because they're designed to be annoyed with you at that age, as long as they have those skills, they can often do it in public, like out of the home. So I know, like, when my brother was a teenager, my mum always used to find it very frustrating that he wouldn't do anything at home or help with anything. But whenever he went to a friend's house, the mum would be like, "Oh, he was so helpful. He like laid the table for us without asking," and she'd be like, "Oh, wish she'd do that at home."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great strategy.
Hmm. And I guess if you've done that work to give them that foundation of empathy and they understand that in public or around other people, and so then I guess once he'd got through his difficult teenage phase, like as an adult, he's very good at all that stuff. So I guess if you've
Yeah.
been doing it from early, you've got to have faith that your work is in there somewhere, even if they're
Yeah.
particularly difficult teenagers.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, I remember my nephews, like, they'd roll their eyes having to do something, right?
Hmm.
But they would still do it. And I wonder if underneath the rolling of their eyes, they kind of appreciated that verbal praise. Like, that,
Hmm.
because I would say things like, wow, that's so good, I know your mom's been really stressed out, like, it's so nice that you're doing that. I love that. And then sometimes I would say things like, now that you've done that, we can go to the pool, or we could go do something fun.
Hmm.
So I guess that's also a reward, right? Like, not necessarily material, but um more social,
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah, I was actually listening to someone and he was saying what they did when their teens were, I guess they were in a lockdown when their kids were all teens, and so it was quite difficult. And one of the ways they got them to do stuff was like, all right, you guys can pick the music, like stuff that or like play us something that we wouldn't have heard before while we're setting the table or doing washing the dishes afterwards. And so it turned it into like a social thing with bonding
Hmm.
as well as getting stuff done.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And so I guess that's like one of those sort of social rewards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
And again, then it's showing them that you're interested in them. Like they don't, it's not just, you're not just, it's a two-way thing. I think sometimes people forget, like, if you want them to be interested in you and other people, like you've also got to be interested in their stuff, even if you think the music is awful because it's
Yep.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Or the way that they want to do it, right? Or like at their
Hmm.
own pace. I think sometimes we're like, oh, can you get that done already? Or like, why is it taking you so long?
Hmm.
Well, you know what? As long as it takes, like, like let them at it. As long as like it gets done, it gets done. But yeah, I think that's obviously harder said than done sometimes. But I think that's part of what
Yeah.
you're saying too. It's like we need to empathize with them just as they need to empathize with us, and like do things that are important, um, for the house, and for themselves ultimately too.
Yeah, I think that's a skill that I'm sort of really learning with a toddler because they, when they melt down, I have to really, like, really try and be like
Hmm.
empathetic to why because it is frustrating. And sometimes I know like if you do something, it takes a bit longer, but it is so like getting in the car seat takes ages because I let her try and do the buckles up herself, but that just makes
Hmm.
it a happier. It's it's quite fun, but it's when we're in a rush, it's tempting to try and just do it myself. But then I know she's going to get really upset, and actually, it's going to take longer in the long run. But it's really hard to do that, like
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to watch you fiddle with this for like 3 minutes while we're already late.
Oh, yeah.
Trying
Yeah,
to
I can
be
totally
done.
relate to that. Yeah. I mean, toddler or not, right? Like, even now, I feel like emotion regulation is definitely one of the hardest things of parenting.
Hmm.
Just being able to regulate and calm those emotions and respond accordingly, but also to be okay with the negative emotions. Like
Hmm.
sometimes I lose it. Sometimes I yell at my kid and then I read something on Instagram that makes me feel bad about it, telling me that I should never yell at my kids because they'll be traumatized. And then I have to just kind of rebalance and center myself and remember that I'm human. Um, as long as like there's some repair, right? And as
Hmm.
long as I go back to my kid and um, either say I'm sorry or just talk about it, or move
Hmm.
on in a, I don't know, in a, like, I don't want to say in a distracting or normal kind of fashion, but just sometimes it is okay to just move on too and make up for that negative experience with positive experiences, right? Like we know that that works.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's actually part of that empathy building for them is like, especially when they've been almost deliberately pushing you to start to learn that understanding of like, oh, actually, if I continue to do this, I'm going to upset people who I love. Like, obviously, we'd prefer not to for that to be like a loss of control shouting, but that does happen sometimes. But like for them to have that understanding of like, oh, actually, yeah, if I'm mean to someone over and over again, then they are going to get frustrated and have a reaction to it. So I need to learn how to express myself without doing that. As long as you can have the conversation afterwards of like, I try not to shout when that's happening, but because that's like a life skill around all this empathy stuff as well.
Oh, 100%. You know how many times I tell my kid, I'm human. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I yelled. I know I shouldn't have, but oh, honey, I'm just tired, or I just lost my patience. And just like describing that and talking it through.
Hmm.
Um, and now I've actually noticed like he's become really well versed in emotion. Like, and I think
Hmm.
that's like the the message that I think a lot of people are trying to put forth on emotions. Like I don't necessarily think we need to be talking about emotion all the time and kids'
No.
feelings. I think that drowns them in like just self focus. But I definitely think that when emotions are high or at play or just very evident, um, it's good to talk it out, right? And not dismiss,
Hmm.
obviously. And I've noticed now that, like, when he really is experiencing something, or he's mad, or he's frustrated, like, he'll name it. We'll
Yeah.
talk about it briefly, and then, like, he's able to move on. Or he'll be upset for a while, but at least he can sit in it and not have this like completely dysregulated tantrum, like he did a couple years ago. Granted, that's also developmental. He's like over
Yeah.
5 now. Um, but I think it's also like emotional maturity. I think he's getting to that
Yeah.
point where he's really understanding to just kind of sit in emotions and be able to move past them too.
But I'm sure being able to name the emotions must help with being able to sit in them better because you actually you have a better understanding of what the
Understand.
feeling you're feeling is.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's I mean that's always a primary recommendation, right, by emotion
Hmm.
researchers and psychologists is like naming and understanding um is really important. Um right? It's part of recognizing. So you need to and it's
Yeah.
part of empathy. You need to really recognize emotion and hopefully, right, really recognize it as someone else's and not your own. I think it's too often it's so easy for us to project and like,
Hmm.
still confuse someone else's emotion as our own or think more about how we would respond or how we feel. Um,
Hmm.
but it's so important to like keep it separate and recognize someone else's emotion as their own and then respond with them in mind, thinking about them
Mhm.
and what they need and what they want, and not necessarily what you think is right, and I know that's, again, easier said than done. I've made a ton of empathy misses there myself, right? Where I think I respond in a way that I think is helpful, but really it's maybe helpful in the way I think it's helpful and not the way the other person thinks it's helpful. Um, but that's okay too. I mean, that's part of it. We're all trying well, many of us are trying our best, um, and I think we're trying to instill the very same thing in our kids, right? To be
Yeah.
able to do those things too.
Yeah. And I think it's actually something you see a lot, that's like a difference in how men and women approach things often, is that men's first instinct will be to try and like solve the problem, where often women just want someone to listen to the problem. And the advice that
Hmm.
I've heard a lot, and I think it's advice that's good for teenagers as well, because often teenagers just want you to they don't want you to solve the problem for them. And so like
Hmm.
when someone starts to tell you about a problem, it can be helpful like for you to remember it as well, but to say to them, is this a situation where you just want to tell me about it, or do you want
Hmm.
my advice or help? And that it's useful obviously for them because they can tell you, but also for you because it reminds you not to like leap into helper mode if you're a helper.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, even just asking like, "What can I do right now?" or like, "What do you
Hmm.
need from me?"
Yeah,
Can be super helpful. Yeah, for you too, right? It clarifies your role
yeah,
because
gives you
sometimes
the
we don't
pause.
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I've learned that the hard way for sure.
So what's yeah, and it is difficult because if you're like a helping person, and actually especially if you've got good empathy, like, and you someone that you love is in like emotional distress, like you want to help them fix it, but sometimes just being there is all they actually need. But it's hard not to be like, oh, I've got like 10 things that I can send you that'll fix this.
Right, right. Yeah. But I think
um
also, so I think also though sometimes it's also about the dynamic or the
mhm,
relationship. Like I don't want people to feel like we always need to do that, right? Or we
yeah,
always have to watch what we say or um respond in a certain way.
yeah,
I think it's also about taking stock of our relationships and
mhm,
better ways, right? So with some people, I know that I can't do that. I can just jump in and kind of
yeah,
react a little more impulsively or just say what I think, that person really needs. And I'm not going to get attacked for it. Like, in fact,
yeah,
that just happened with a really good friend. And she said, I really love the unsolicited advice. I need more than that. I
yeah.
appreciated that. Whereas with other people, no way. I would not do that. So you also just kind of you need to know to read the room.
Yeah. And with good friends, they've probably come to you because they know that you're going to have the kind of advice they want. And you have that dynamic where they're like, that's the person I'm going to ask because she'll know
Yeah.
what I want
I
to
mean,
hear.
you would think, right? Yeah, yeah. And
Hmm.
so, sometimes even non-good friends might, you know, um, disclose or share or vent, right? Because
Hmm.
who knows where, what moment or circumstance you've caught them in life. But yeah, I think it's just important to read the room. And I already try to teach that in my 5-year-old too, like, because he can be really excited when he first meets up with friends, right? And he can be overly boisterous or dramatic or, makes really like goofy pranks. And I have to remind him, like, honey, some people like that, some don't, right? And so we've kind of gone over like, okay, which people do you think you can be more playful with? And like, which people do you think you need to give more space, right? Because they like more space.
Hmm.
And so we're already kind of talking about that. I mean, he certainly doesn't execute all the time, but I'm
Yeah.
noticing that he's like catching on. At least he's getting the idea and he's like understanding that different people require different things. Different people have different needs and different pain points.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good way of talking about it because it's like a real world situation where like some people take a bit of time to warm up when we get somewhere new, and some people can throw themselves straight in. And like starting to think about it in advance then helps you a it has that empathy for like makes your relationships better because you're not gonna upset someone straight away, but also yeah, like starting to think about, oh, not everyone is the same as me, and how can
Right.
I like
Right.
adjust my behavior for them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting. In empathy research, we know that one sure way to motivate empathy, especially across differences, is to
Mm-hmm.
highlight commonalities, right? Like really
Mm-hmm.
focus on some similarity, right? Have a shared goal, work towards the same thing. Um, and that's all very true. But one thing we're kind of hoping to really experiment with at MCC is the value and also really embracing and talking about differences, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we need more of that where it's also a really good thing to notice differences, um, really appreciate them, and want more of them, like that's, and so when we say that one way to motivate empathy is to create different experiences, to really humanize and connect with others, I
Mm-hmm.
think one way to do that is to really change it up, expose kids to different experiences, different people, different
Mm-hmm.
neighborhoods, different activities. I think if they're always stuck, like doing the same thing or like being in the same environment around the same people, um, they might be stuck in only empathizing for certain people, right? And it's just really crucial that we teach kids to expand their empathy and their, what we call circles of concern, circles of care, to not just care for
Mm-hmm.
people like them or who they like, but for all sorts of people. Yeah. And speaking of chores, you can apply that to chores, right? Like change it up. Maybe instead of like always doing the same task or having them help out with the same thing, maybe they can do something else, right? Maybe it can change like week to week. Maybe they can do it with a sibling or with a friend, right? Like mowing the lawn for teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
they can enlist a friend. Um, that's something where I think it is okay to pay them. That's a really hard
Yeah.
job, especially in the summer. So there you go. It's
Yeah.
not only socially, but also like materially rewarding. And they feel good about it and
Yes.
they've like helped out.
Yeah, something my parents did that I think was quite good is we had like the core things, like that we did not get paid for, like helping set the table, make meals. Clear. I'm one of four, and like from quite early, we all have to cook a meal each a week. Just kind of being part of the household in
Wow.
that way. Yeah, my mum, we're a really foodie family, but my mum was like from quite young. We were all like, it's like having pasta. A 9-year-old can do that with supervision, so you can help, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then she had other things, and it was like a list, and they would pay us, but you could pick, and you didn't have to do it. But it was like if you want extra pocket money, there's a list that includes like mowing the lawn, ironing, mopping floors, like deep cleaning stuff, with how much you'd get paid if you did
Okay.
it. But you didn't have to, and you could pick instead of being like the car has to be washed, so that's all you've got the offer. And actually having that choice, I think probably meant we did do more because then you're like, oh, what do I feel like
Yeah. Oh,
doing
I
now?
like that. Yeah, that's brilliant. And so certain things were paid and certain.
Yeah, the kind of core things that like laundry, cleaning up after meal, like none of that was all like expected,
Yeah.
but the kind of
Taking
extra
out the
stuff
trash.
that
Right. Got
yeah,
it.
and the stuff like cleaning the car, like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if that doesn't get done, but if it does, it's quite nice. So they'd give us a bit of money for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's really brilliant. And then it's a choice. And then, but what if they're like always picking the really hard stuff to always get paid? I guess that's okay. I mean, hopefully they're spending
Yeah, I
that
think
money on something good.
I always used to do all the ironing because I like that, and I could sit down and do it inside and like watch TV while I was doing it. Whereas like my
Yeah.
brothers are like pretty active, and they used to do a lot of the like yard worky stuff. So I think we kind of all almost always would kind of fall into patterns with it still. But it
Yeah.
did mean like if
Yeah.
I didn't feel like doing it, there was no pressure. But like if I knew we were going to go somewhere and I would want to like buy something from the gift shop, or my friends would all have money to like go and get a ice cream or something, then you could be
Yeah.
like, oh, right, I need £5. Like, what can I do on the list that's going to get me the money I need
Yeah.
to do the thing I want to do?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's fair. I feel like I love vacuuming. That's my consistent thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I vacuum and I organize, and my partner cooks and does the laundry. It's amazing.
That's so good. Yeah, my partner does a
I
lot of
know. I'm
cooking
so
as well. It's
lucky.
handy.
Yeah, I'm lucky.
Yeah, it is good. But I think that it is interesting that in our generation seems to be something that's changed where like there's way less gendered roles, and again that's about empathy. Like we all live in the house, we can all contribute to the running of the household.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's in that same
Seeing
like
it as
empathy
part of a
zone of like,
collective.
yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to the collective, right? Like just really emphasizing community, um, helping others, right? It's not just about yourself. It's not just about you making some money.
Hmm.
And I think that's where it might get tricky, right? Where if it does become about that, I think that's why,
Yeah.
we have to be a little cautious about the monetary reward, right? Like you don't want
Yeah.
it just to be about that. You want it to be about more than that. And I think that's where like the nudging, the prompting, the conversations,
Hmm.
um, right? Like the modeling, right? Like because it's like
Hmm.
social norms help. It helps to know that it's valued and expected and done by others. And I think that also includes us, right? Like so hopefully if
Yeah.
they see that like we're doing a lot, we're working hard and taking care of the household, like they should want to do that too. And then and unfortunately if they don't, I think that's where, right? It's okay to maybe take away certain privileges, right? If they're being
Hmm.
resistant, or difficult or just completely avoidant of helping out, and
Hmm.
doing chores. Like I think it's okay to call that out and say,
Yeah.
that's not cool. Like that's completely not
Yeah.
cool. And why do you think you get to earn, right, all these good things you get at the house if you don't even help out?
Hmm.
So also, I think it also then, reminds them that like things need to be earned, right? Not just given.
Yeah. And it is a tricky balance because again, like part of raising kids that sometimes we lose sight of is trying to raise adults who are going to be productive in society, but hopefully are also going to have like successful relationships with other people. And
Hmm.
they need to understand that like in order to be someone who's a nice adult to live with, that involves
Yeah.
being thoughtful and helpful, and you're setting them up to have better relationships in the future, like with friends or romantic partners, all those things.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I love, so actually, I just thought that myself when my 5 year
Mm-hmm.
old was helping me clean the house the other day. I was using the Swiffer, and before the
Mm-hmm.
Swiffer, I told him, we might need to do some dusting first because it's really dusty, especially like at the banister of our, the stairway. And he wanted to do it because it was this like long dust
Oh yeah,
thing.
it's
I don't know what
fun.
you call it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he thought it was really fun. He was like, ooh, a stick with like what looks like a huge mop, but like it's really, thick and furry. And he was just like, he really got into it. And yeah, it was appealing, but he was also helping. And all I could think to myself as I was watching him clean so well, mind you, all I could think was, and then I said it out loud, wow, Luke,
Mm-hmm.
whoever you end up with in life is going to be the luckiest person on this planet. I love like what a great helper you are. And he looked at me with
Mm-hmm.
such pride. But yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Like I'm molding this little person into such a good human, like a helper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that's another really good thing for like reward is to actually say like, wow, you're such a great helper. Like, rather than
Yeah.
just like, thanks for helping. Sometimes the adjective like of being a good person really can
Hmm.
stick with kids. Like when it comes to moral behavior, that can be super impactful.
So is that about the way you say it then? So instead of saying like, "Oh, that was kind," you would say like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
wow, you're so kind."
Exactly. Wow. Wow, you're such a kind person. You're being so kind right
Hmm.
now. Um Yeah. I mean, it's okay, it's okay to change
Yeah.
it up and like not use the right words sometimes, right? Because I
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
don't want to perpetuate the problem of Instagram where like we're always told what to say. And if we don't say it, we
Yeah.
feel terrible about ourselves. Um, but it's such a small little change.
Hmm.
And it is known to really produce like really positive effects. Like it can stick with kids because then they internalize that and they come to see themselves as really good moral people, knowing that they're helpers and that they're kind.
Yeah, I'm with you on the language thing, but it is interesting because like I had to make a real conscious effort to use more positive language instead of negative language because I realized I was really bad at that. And then obviously, and they can't understand, you know, don't do that because at two they don't have the language. And so then once I change that, you notice that they understand you better. But it did make me reflect a bit on how your kind of default language is often like no, like don't do that
Yeah.
rather than the opposite, which is once you get used to it, makes you
Yep.
feel better too.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's so true. One language that has really stuck with me that I see people doing a lot, but also me, right? Sometimes I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, please just be nice, or that's not nice. And I see that all the time. And I just don't think that's really effective, right? Because we constantly tell kids, like, don't do that. That's not nice. Or be nice.
Hmm.
But they continue doing the very thing we don't want them to do in most cases. So it's
Hmm.
clearly not effective. And I think it's because we're not really connecting, right, what we want from them to the why, right? and
Hmm.
and they don't really get to see it. So like I think either we have to like be really clear on like why we want that of them or what we mean by that, or we
Hmm.
need to show it, right? um and have a consequence, right? Like it was so interesting. We're at a play date like a couple of weeks ago, and um these friends of ours, like they just weren't getting along, and the siblings, and instead of just separating them or removing one from the situation, right, the adult just kept saying, be nice, be nice, be nice to your sister.
Hmm.
But it kept going on, and it was just so interesting because I get it. We're tired, we just want to enjoy our day,
Yeah.
so we just sit there and try to like avoid it, or like try to completely block it out. But we're not blocking it out because we keep saying be nice, be nice, be nice. So I think
Yeah.
like it'll make our lives easier if we just handle it, right? Or talk about it. um so that things actually do stick with our kids. um
Yeah. And be nice is not very
right.
specific, I guess. And when you've been talking about that, I was just starting to think, yeah, it's actually just not specific enough. And so it's quite a
Hmm.
vague instruction where like if I try, like we're in a big phase where when she's having her diaper change, she'll just kick because she thinks it's really funny. And so instead of trying to say don't kick, I try and say something like, "Oh, it hurts me when you
Yeah.
kick me," rather than saying don't do it because it again, it's if you just say like don't do that, it's not very helpful. And also, it's not a specific instruction that they can follow. So
Yeah,
trying
they
to,
don't know why.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I try and be like very specific, but it's quite hard because you don't always. It often takes a while. You need it to happen a few times to think about how you can be specific in the moment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think in that moment, I think times out of 10, it's probably a good thing to refer to like how you or someone else feels, right? Like, again,
Hmm.
like put it on the other. So versus just saying be nice, how do you think your sister feels when you do that? Or can you imagine if
Hmm.
she did that to you? You know you'd be upset. And they might fight you on that and say, no, I'd be okay. I'm tough. No, buddy, I don't think so. And even though that lends itself to like a longer conversation you might want at the time, it's a learning moment. It's a teachable moment.
Hmm.
And I think the more we do that in the short term, the better off we are in the long term because they'll get it. And like one day it'll click and they'll really start thinking about their actions and their consequences on other people. Because ultimately, that's a big
Yeah.
part of what we want, right? We want kids to learn that their actions affect others, that they should care about others and their feelings, and that they're not the center of attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing in terms of that, trying to have raise kids who understand that kind of collective feeling. But you've got to start from the ground up. And so yes, at the beginning it's a lot of repetition early, but then that's quite fundamental to how they're learning language and internalizing stuff from right at the start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so interesting. I know you guys have a lot of stuff on your website that people can use, so I just love it if you could like talk about the kind of resources that are available a bit before we finish.
Sure, yeah. We do have some resources for families or caregivers, some strategies
Hmm.
geared towards parents of younger kids, mainly
Hmm.
around building empathy, gratitude, also diligence or hard work, which applies to
Hmm.
doing chores you might not want to do. We also have some resources on mental health, specific to mental health, especially, as a result of a lot of our research lately on that topic. For educators and for schools, we have a number of free resources that are in a wider collection for much of our school based programming. So, like, we have a flagship school program called Caring Schools Network. And it involves
Hmm.
3 phases of work with a slew of strategies and resources. And we're actually in the recruitment phase right now. So, if anyone's interested or, there's parents or caregivers who think their schools could use resources around building caring communities, please reach out. We also have some really cool relationship mapping strategies. So they're strategies to help anchor students to caring school adults or caring peers and other students at the school
Mm.
community. Um, and we actually now also have students for caring schools and parents for caring schools. So, kind of an offshoot of the Caring Schools Network, but specific to students and parents, either teaching lessons or finding ways and strategies to build caring in their schools. So, really putting the onus on young people and caregivers, of course, with our facilitation, our consultation, our help. And like I said, we have a mental health toolkit as well. And there's also resources for colleges. I'm not closely linked to that work, but we certainly have a number of cool projects and resources related to college admissions. Um, Trisha Anderson directs that work. She's doing a fabulous job. I think she was just featured in Forbes even, because they're doing a really cool pilot with the state of Tennessee on testing out what's called direct admissions. So, like, directly admitting students into college based on merit and some other factors. And yeah, it's really exciting work. It's really taking off.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been so interesting talking to you, and I think this is like an area that people, it can become quite an area of stress in like a lot of people's lives about how to like, that they feel like they're getting this stuff wrong, but actually it's quite helpful to
Mm.
hear, um that it's not really, unless it's not something you get wrong like by just doing it once. It's a kind of in your whole life, because it's part of that empathy for yourself as well as your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I may have said this earlier. I feel like one of the main ways to motivate empathy is to know that it's not fixed, it's not something set, that it's a
Mm-hmm.
malleable capacity, right? And so to really introduce like growth mindset around empathy, it's something that we can like grow and get better in. So yeah, by far, I would say it's so important to know that it's trial and error. We're all just trying our best. And to not get stuck, right, in the narratives of what we should do, or shouldn't be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly not being stuck on like, there's so much advice out there, on what we should be doing and how we may or may not be harming our kids, whether it be by our language or, our actions. And to some degree, sure, there might be like a little bit of truth in some of that. Like there's like pockets, right, of things we know are,
Mm-hmm.
um, potentially harmful, but also helpful. But I think in general, I think as long as we give our kids love, like true love that they can feel, and part of that means
Mm-hmm.
presence, like really being present and attentive to their needs, um, and some structure and warmth and, fun experiences and those, diverse experiences I mentioned, we're doing a great job. um,
Yeah.
and then the rest will just kind of work itself out.
Yeah. I think that's really true. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
Oh,
I
me
really appreciate
too.
your
Yeah,
time.
thanks so much.